Poor Waitress whispered to a Hell's Angel, "He won't stop following me." What he did shocked everyone. The morning sun had barely crept over the horizon when Sarah Martinez pushed open the heavy glass door of the Riverside Diner, her third consecutive double shift weighing on her like a physical burden. At 23 years old, she had the kind of exhaustion that settled deep into bones, the type that no amount of coffee could chase away. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her uniform, a pink waitress dress with a white apron, had seen better days, though she kept it meticulously clean. Sarah had been working at the diner for almost 2 years now, ever since her mother's medical bills had started piling up like an avalanche of financial despair. The Riverside Diner sat on the edge of Highway 97, a stretch of asphalt that cut through the heart of rural Oregon like a scar. It was the kind of place where truckers stopped for coffee at 3 in the morning, where locals gathered for Sunday breakfast, and where the pie was always fresh because Sarah's boss, Margaret, refused to serve anything less than homemade. The diner had that timeless quality. Red vinyl booths, a long counter with spinning stools, and a jukebox in the corner that still played songs from the 70s. Sarah had grown up in this town, graduated from the local high school with decent grades and big dreams of becoming a nurse. But life had a way of rearranging plans. Her mother's diagnosis had come suddenly, stage 3 breast cancer, and with it came a tidal wave of medical expenses that their modest insurance barely covered. Her father had passed away when she was 12, leaving them with little savings and even fewer options. So Sarah had postponed college, picked up as many shifts as she could, and became intimately familiar with the exhaustion that came from working 70 hours a week. The bell above the door chimed as she entered, and Margaret looked up from behind the counter where she was prepping for the morning rush. Margaret was in her 60s, with silver hair always pinned in a neat bun and eyes that missed nothing. She had owned the diner for 30 years and treated her employees like family, which meant she worried about Sarah more than she probably should. "You look tired, honey," Margaret said, her voice carrying that maternal concern that made Sarah's chest tighten with gratitude and guilt in equal measure. "I'm fine," Sarah replied with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just need some coffee." But Sarah wasn't fine, and both women knew it. Beyond the exhaustion from work, beyond the stress of medical bills and her mother's deteriorating health, there was something else. Someone else. For the past 3 weeks, Sarah had been aware of a presence in her life that sent chills down her spine and made her constantly look over her shoulder. His name was Derek Collins, and he was trouble in human form. He had started coming into the diner about a month ago, always sitting in Sarah's section, always watching her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. At first, she had tried to brush it off as nothing, just another customer who stared a little too long. But then he started showing up everywhere. At the grocery store where she shopped after her shift, outside the small apartment she shared with her mother, in the parking lot of the medical clinic where her mother received chemotherapy treatments. Derek was in his late 30s, with slicked back hair and a thin build that somehow made him more menacing rather than less. He wore cheap cologne that announced his presence before he even entered a room. And he had a way of smiling that never touched his cold, gray eyes. He had never touched her, never explicitly threatened her. But Sarah knew predatory behavior when she saw it. She had tried talking to the local police, but without concrete threats or physical contact, they said there wasn't much they could do. "Get a restraining order," they suggested, as if that piece of paper would protect her from someone who clearly didn't care about boundaries. Sarah had started varying her routes home, asking friends to walk her to her car and sleeping with a baseball bat next to her bed. But the fear was constant. a low-grade anxiety that hummed in the background of everything she did. She felt trapped, helpless, and increasingly desperate. On this particular morning, Sarah threw herself into work with the kind of focus that came from needing distraction. The breakfast rush came and went. Eggs and bacon, pancakes and coffee. The familiar rhythm of orders and service. Margaret worked the kitchen while Sarah handled the floor, her feet aching in worn sneakers that she kept meaning to replace but couldn't afford to. It was around 10:30 when she heard the distinctive rumble of motorcycles approaching. The sound grew louder, a deep thunder that made the windows rattle slightly, and Sarah glanced up to see a group of bikers pulling into the parking lot. There were about 8 of them, riding chrome and steel beasts that gleamed in the morning sun. They wore leather jackets adorned with patches, and even from a distance, Sarah could see the distinctive insignia on their backs. A winged skull over the words, Hell's Angels. Sarah felt her stomach tighten slightly. She had served bikers before, and most of them were perfectly pleasant customers. Better tippers than the Sunday church crowd, honestly. But there was always an element of unpredictability. These weren't weekend warriors riding Harley-Davidsons to feel rebellious. These were the real deal, members of one of the most notorious motorcycle clubs in the world. The bell above the door chimed as they filed in, their boots heavy on the linoleum floor. They were a diverse group, different ages, different builds. But they all carried themselves with a certain confidence that came from belonging to something bigger than themselves. Some had long beards, others were clean-shaven. Several had visible tattoos creeping up their necks and covering their hands. They looked like men who had seen things, done things, and didn't apologize for any of it. The man who entered last was different from the others, and Sarah noticed him immediately. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled out his leather jacket in a way that suggested real strength rather than gym-cultivated muscle. His hair was dark with threads of silver, cut short but not military precise, and his beard was trimmed close to his jaw. He had the weathered face of someone who had spent a lot of time outdoors, with lines around his eyes that spoke of years spent squinting into the sun while riding. He looked to be in his mid-40s, and there was something about the way the other bikers deferred to him, making space as he walked, that suggested he was someone important in their hierarchy. His name, Sarah would later learn, was Marcus Reaper Donovan, and he was the sergeant-at-arms of the local Hells Angels chapter. The sergeant-at-arms was responsible for security, for protecting the club and its members, for ensuring that threats were neutralized before they became problems. Marcus had been with the club for over 20 years, having earned his patch when he was barely in his 20s after proving himself in ways he never talked about to outsiders. He had done time in prison, a stint in his late 20s for assault, though the circumstances around that were complicated and involved protecting someone who couldn't protect themselves. He had come out harder, but not cruel, tougher, but not without principles. The bikers settled into the large corner booth, the one that could accommodate big groups, and their conversation was a low rumble of male voices and occasional laughter. Sarah took a breath, grabbed her order pad, and approached the table with her professional smile firmly in place. "Morning, gentlemen," she said, her voice friendly, but not overly so. "Coffee to start?" There was a chorus of affirmatives, and Sarah began filling cups, aware of their eyes on her, but not in the uncomfortable way she had become accustomed to with Derek. These were just men appreciating a pretty woman, nothing predatory about it. "What's good here, sweetheart?" one of them asked, a younger biker with a red beard and friendly eyes. "The breakfast special is always solid," Sarah replied. "2 eggs any style, bacon or sausage, hash browns, and toast." Margaret makes the hash browns from scratch, and the bacon is locally sourced. If you're really hungry, the lumberjack omelet is popular. Comes with pretty much everything. They ordered enough food to feed a small army, and Sarah headed back to the kitchen to put in the tickets. As she worked, she couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on her back. And when she glanced over her shoulder, she caught Marcus watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not predatory, but curious, assessing. When their eyes met, he didn't look away or leer like some men did. He just gave a small nod, almost respectful, before turning back to his conversation. Sarah was bringing refills of coffee when she felt it. That familiar prickle of awareness that had become her constant companion. She looked toward the door and felt her blood run cold. Derek had just walked in, and his eyes locked onto her immediately with that possessive intensity that made her want to run. He slid into a booth near the window, in her section, of course, and Sarah felt her hands begin to tremble slightly. She delivered the coffee to the biker's table, forcing herself to stay calm, to not let her fear show. But Marcus noticed. Of course he noticed. Men like him were trained to read body language, to spot threats and weaknesses. He saw the way her smile had become forced, the way her shoulders had tensed, the way her eyes kept darting toward the booth by the window. "You okay?" he asked quietly as she poured his coffee, his voice a low rumble that somehow didn't carry beyond their booth. "Fine," Sarah said automatically, but her voice was too tight, too forced. Marcus glanced toward Derek, then back to Sarah, his eyes narrowing slightly. He didn't push, didn't ask more questions, but she could feel his attention sharpening, focusing. He had spent enough years reading situations to know when something was wrong, and something was definitely wrong here. Sarah forced herself to approach Derek's booth, order pad in hand. "What can I get you?" she asked, keeping her voice neutral. "Hey, Sarah," Derek said, and the familiarity in his tone made her skin crawl. "Been hoping I'd see you today. You look beautiful as always." "Thank you," she said stiffly. "What would you like to order?" "Coffee, black, and maybe some of your time." He smiled, and it was the kind of smile that was meant to be charming but missed by a mile. "I was thinking maybe I could take you out sometime. There's a nice Italian place over in Bend. We could make a night of it." "I'm very busy with work and taking care of my mother," Sarah replied, the excuse worn smooth from repetition. "Really don't have time for dating right now." "Come on, Sarah. I've been asking for weeks now. Just one date. What's the harm in that?" There was something in his voice now, a hardness beneath the false friendliness. "I'm a nice guy. You'd see that if you gave me a chance?" Sarah felt trapped, aware that several customers were now watching the exchange. "I need to get your order in," she said, avoiding the question. "Just coffee?" Derek's expression darkened slightly. "Yeah, just coffee. For now." As Sarah walked away, she felt his eyes boring into her back, and her hands were shaking hard enough that she had to pause before pouring the coffee to avoid spilling it. When she brought his cup, Derek reached out and grabbed her wrist, not hard enough to hurt, but firmly enough to keep her there. "You know, Sarah, I don't like being brushed off. I've been very patient with you." "Please let go," Sarah said, her voice low but firm. "Not until you agree to have dinner with me. Let go. Now." There was fear in her voice now, impossible to hide. From across the diner, Marcus had been watching the entire exchange with increasing focus. He saw the grab, saw Sarah's body language shift from tense to terrified, and something cold and hard settled in his chest. He knew that look. He had seen it on the face of his sister 20 years ago, when she had been dealing with an abusive ex-boyfriend, right before that ex had put her in the hospital. That was the incident that had earned Marcus his assault charge and his prison time, and he had never regretted it for a second. His sister was alive because he had intervened. If he had waited, if he had let the system handle it, she might not have been. Marcus stood up, his movement fluid and deliberate, and crossed the diner in a few long strides. He stopped beside Sarah's table, and Derek looked up, still holding Sarah's wrist. Up close, Derek looked even more pathetic. A would-be predator who picked on women because he couldn't handle real confrontation. "You need to let her go," Marcus said, his voice quiet but carrying an edge like a blade. Derek's eyes widened slightly as he took in Marcus's size, the leather jacket with its patches, the absolutely unwavering look in his eyes. But he tried to maintain his bravado. "This is a private conversation." "It stopped being private when you put your hands on her without permission. Let her go." There was a moment of tense silence, and then Derek released Sarah's wrist. Marcus moved slightly, positioning himself between Derek and Sarah in a way that was clearly protective. "You okay?" he asked Sarah without taking his eyes off Derek. Sarah nodded, rubbing her wrist even though Derek hadn't actually hurt her. "Yeah, thank you." "Why don't you go take care of your other customers?" Marcus suggested gently. "I'll handle this." Sarah didn't need to be told twice. She practically fled back toward the counter, where Margaret was watching with concerned eyes. The other bikers had noticed the situation too, and Sarah saw them shift in their booth, ready to back up their brother if needed. Marcus slid into the booth across from Derek, uninvited, and leaned back with a casual posture that somehow made him seem even more dangerous. "Here's how this is going to work," he said conversationally. "You're going to finish your coffee, you're going to pay your bill, and you're going to leave. And then you're not going to come back here. Ever." Derek tried to muster some courage, some defiance. "You can't tell me where I can and can't eat. This is a public place." "You're right," Marcus agreed. "It is a public place, which means there are witnesses to you harassing that young woman. Grabbing her wrist like that? That's assault, unwanted physical contact. I'm sure the police would be very interested in hearing about it." "She's overreacting. I barely touched her." "Funny thing about that," Marcus said, his voice dropping lower. "I don't think she's overreacting at all. In fact, I think she's been dealing with you for a while now, hasn't she? Showing up where she works, where she shops, following her around. That's called stalking, friend. And it's a crime." Derek's face flushed red. "I don't know what she told you, but..." "She didn't tell me anything," Marcus interrupted. "I'm just good at reading situations. And the situation I'm reading is this. You're a creep who doesn't understand that no means no, who thinks persistence is romantic when it's actually harassment, and who needs to learn that there are consequences to making women feel unsafe." The temperature at the table seemed to drop several degrees. Derek looked like he wanted to argue, wanted to defend himself. But something in Marcus's eyes stopped him. This wasn't a man who made empty threats. This was someone who had been in real fights, real danger, and had come out on top. This was someone who would follow through. "I could have my brothers outside waiting for you in the parking lot," Marcus continued casually. "Could make sure you understand just how seriously we take harassment. Or you could save us all the trouble and just do the smart thing, leave and never come back." "You threatening me?" Derek tried to sound tough, but his voice cracked slightly. "I'm giving you a choice," Marcus corrected. "And some free advice. Women like her, they're just trying to live their lives, do their jobs, take care of their families. They don't deserve to be hassled by guys like you who can't take no for an answer. You need to learn some respect." Derek stood up abruptly, throwing a few dollars on the table. "This is bullshit. You can't—" Marcus stood too, and the height difference was immediately apparent. "I can, and I am. Now leave." For a moment, it looked like Derek might actually try to escalate the situation. But then he seemed to register the fact that there were 8 bikers in the diner, all watching him with unwavering attention. He was outnumbered and outmatched, and even he was smart enough to realize it. With a final glare at both Marcus and Sarah, he stormed out of the diner, the bell above the door jangling violently as he left. Marcus watched through the window as Derek got into an old sedan and peeled out of the parking lot with unnecessary aggression. Only when the car was out of sight did he turn back toward the counter, where Sarah was standing with wide eyes and trembling hands. He approached slowly, holding his hands in a non-threatening position. "You okay?" he asked again. Sarah nodded, but tears were starting to well in her eyes, the release of tension after weeks of fear. "Thank you," she managed to say. Thank you." "How long's he been bothering you?" Marcus asked. "About 3 weeks," Sarah admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "He comes in almost every day, and I've seen him outside my apartment, at the grocery store, at my mom's doctor's office. I went to the police, but they said without actual threats, there's nothing they can do." Marcus's jaw tightened. They're not entirely wrong, legally speaking. But that doesn't mean you should have to deal with it. He pulled out his wallet and extracted a business card, surprisingly professional looking for a biker. "This has my number. If he comes back, if he bothers you again, you call me immediately. Understand?" Sarah took the card with shaking hands. "Why are you helping me?" Something flickered across Marcus's face, something old and painful. "Let's just say I know what happens when guys like that don't get stopped. And I also know that sometimes the system doesn't move fast enough to prevent people from getting hurt." He paused, seeming to weigh whether to say more. "My sister had a stalker once. Ex-boyfriend who couldn't accept it was over. Cops couldn't do much until he actually did something. By the time I got involved, she was in the hospital with a fractured skull and broken ribs." "Oh my God," Sarah breathed. "She's okay now," Marcus assured her. "Lives in California with her husband and kids. But she wouldn't be if someone hadn't stepped in when the law couldn't. So yeah, I'm helping you because I know how this story can end, and I'm not going to let that happen on my watch." Sarah felt tears spilling over now, and before she could think about whether it was appropriate, she stepped forward and hugged him. Marcus stiffened in surprise for just a moment before gently patting her back in an awkward but kind gesture. When she pulled away, embarrassed, he just smiled slightly. "You're tougher than you think," he said. "Working 3 jobs to take care of your mom, dealing with that creep, still managing to smile at customers. That takes real strength. But you don't have to handle everything alone." "I don't even know your name," Sarah realized. "Marcus," he said. "Marcus Donovan, though most people call me Reaper." "That's a scary nickname," Sarah said with a watery laugh. "Yeah, well, sometimes scary is useful," Marcus replied. He gestured back to his booth, where his brothers were still waiting, their food getting cold. "I should get back, but seriously, you have any more trouble with that guy, you call me." "I will," Sarah promised. "Thank you, Marcus. Really." As Marcus returned to his booth, Sarah felt something shift inside her. The constant low-grade terror that had been her companion for weeks had eased, replaced by something unfamiliar, hope. For the first time in a long time, She felt like maybe she wasn't alone in this fight. The bikers finished their breakfast, and when they paid their bill, Marcus left a tip that was nearly as large as the total check. As they filed out, several of them nodded to Sarah, a gesture of acknowledgement and respect. She watched through the window as they mounted their motorcycles, engines roaring to life. And then they were gone, disappearing down the highway in a thunder of chrome and leather. Margaret came up beside her, watching them go. "That was something," the older woman said quietly. "I was about to grab the baseball bat from the back when that Marcus fellow stood up." "He was amazing," Sarah said. "I've been so scared, Margaret. You don't even know. And he just handled it like it was nothing." "Men like that," Margaret said thoughtfully. "They're not like regular men. They live by a different code. Can be dangerous, sure, but also—" She trailed off, searching for the right word. Noble, in their own way. Old-fashioned about certain things, especially when it comes to protecting women and children. "He gave me his number," Sarah said, looking at the business card in her hand. "Told me to call if Derek comes back." "Good," Margaret said firmly. "You do that. And in the meantime, we need to document everything. Every time that Derek Creep shows up, what he says, what he does. Build a paper trail for the police, just in case." Sarah nodded, feeling more focused now, more empowered. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she had some control over the situation. The rest of the day passed quietly, and for once, Sarah didn't spend every moment looking over her shoulder, jumping at every customer who walked in. Derek didn't return, and when her shift finally ended at 6, she walked to her car with her head up instead of hunched over in fear. But the relief was short-lived. 3 days later, Derek was back. Sarah was working the evening shift when he walked in, and the sight of him made her blood run cold. He looked different somehow, angrier, more volatile. He had obviously spent the past few days stewing, and the expression on his face promised nothing good. He slid into a booth in her section and just stared at her, not even bothering to look at the menu. Sarah's heart was pounding so hard, she thought she might pass out. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out Marcus's business card, her hands shaking as she pulled out her phone. She stepped into the kitchen, away from Derek's line of sight, and dialed the number with trembling fingers. Marcus answered on the second ring. "Yeah. Marcus, it's Sarah, from the diner. He's back. Derek's back, and he looks really angry, and I don't know what to do." "I'll be there in 15 minutes, Marcus said immediately. "Don't approach him. Stay in the kitchen if you can, or make sure you're always near other people. I'm coming." "Okay," Sarah whispered. "Okay. Thank you." She hung up and looked at Margaret, who had been listening. "He's coming," Sarah said. "Marcus is coming." "Good," Margaret said, her mouth set in a firm line. She picked up a large knife and began ostentatiously sharpening it on a whetstone, positioning herself where she could see through the service window into the dining room. "That boy out there tries anything. He'll find out that I'm not as sweet as I look." Despite her fear, Sarah almost smiled. Margaret was barely 5 feet tall and looked like everyone's grandmother, but she had grown up on a ranch and wasn't afraid of much. The longest 15 minutes of Sarah's life crawled by. Derek didn't order anything, didn't call her over, just sat there staring at her with an expression that made her feel sick. The diner was relatively busy, which provided some comfort. There were witnesses, other people around. But Sarah knew that didn't always matter to men like Derek. Then she heard it. The distinctive rumble of motorcycles. Not just one this time, but several. Sarah looked out the window and saw Marcus pulling into the parking lot, followed by 4 other bikers. They parked their bikes in a line, dismounted with practiced ease, and walked toward the diner with purpose. When they entered, Derek's head snapped around, and Sarah saw his face pale slightly. Marcus's eyes found Sarah first, a quick assessment to make sure she was okay. And then they locked onto Derek. Without a word, Marcus and his brothers approached Derek's booth. "Hey there, friend," Marcus said, his voice carrying that same deceptively casual tone. "Thought we had an understanding. You remember our conversation?" Derek stood up quickly, trying to seem bigger than he was. "This is a free country. I can eat wherever I want." "That's true," Marcus agreed. "But you're not here to eat. You've been sitting here for 20 minutes without ordering, just staring at Sarah over there like a creep. So let's stop pretending this is about your dining choices." "I don't have to explain myself to you," Derek said, but his bravado was crumbling fast. One of Marcus's brothers, a massive man with a shaved head and a beard down to his chest, spoke up. "You really want to do this, man? Really want to make this a thing? Because we can make it a thing." Derek looked around at the 5 bikers surrounding him, at the other customers watching with undisguised interest, at Sarah standing by the kitchen with Margaret beside her. He was trapped, and he knew it. "Fine," he spat. "Fine, I'm leaving." "Not quite that simple," Marcus said. "See, you had your chance to walk away clean, but you came back. That tells me you don't learn lessons easy. So here's the new deal. You don't just stay away from this diner. You stay away from Sarah, period. Her apartment, the grocery store she uses, her mother's medical clinic, all off limits. You see her on the street, you cross to the other side. You understand?" "You can't tell me." "Yeah, I can," Marcus interrupted. "Because if you don't, if I hear that you've been anywhere near her, then we're going to have a very different kind of conversation. The kind that doesn't happen in public. You get me?" The threat was unmistakable, and Derek finally seemed to understand that he was in over his head. These weren't regular guys he could intimidate or manipulate. These were men who lived outside the normal social rules, who had their own justice system, and who wouldn't hesitate to enforce it. "Whatever," Derek muttered, but his voice was defeated. "I don't even know why I bothered. She's not even that pretty." It was the wrong thing to say. Marcus's expression went from stern to furious in an instant, and he took a step forward that made Derek actually back up against the booth. "Get out," Marcus said quietly, his voice like ice. "Right now, before I forget that there are witnesses and decide to teach you a more permanent lesson." Derek scrambled out of the booth and hurried toward the door, practically running. Through the window, they watched him get into his car and drive away with excessive speed, tires squealing as he left the parking lot. Marcus took a breath, composing himself, and then walked over to Sarah. "You okay?" Sarah nodded, though she was shaking. "Yeah, thank you. Again. I don't know how to repay you for—" "You don't owe me anything," Marcus said firmly. "This is what we do. We protect people who can't protect themselves. It's who we are." One of his brothers, a lean man with graying hair and intelligent eyes, spoke up. "We're going to make sure he gets the message. Going to have a couple of guys swing by his place, his work. Make sure he understands that harassment has consequences." "Nothing illegal," Marcus added, seeing the concern on Sarah's face. "Just a reminder that he's being watched, that he can't hide behind the law's slowness to react. Most guys like him, they're cowards. They pick on women because they think women are easy targets. But when they realize there are real consequences, they back down quick. What if he doesn't?" Sarah asked quietly. What if he's really crazy? Marcus's expression softened slightly. Then we'll deal with that too. But honestly, I've seen his type 100 times. He'll move on, find some other poor woman to fixate on. Our job is to make sure that woman isn't you. Sarah felt tears welling up again, not from fear this time, but from overwhelming gratitude and relief. I don't know what I did to deserve this kindness from strangers, but thank you. Truly. You didn't have to do anything to deserve basic human decency and safety, Marcus said. That should be a given. The fact that it's not, that women have to be grateful just for not being harassed, that's messed up. But until the world fixes itself, guys like us will keep doing what we do. Over the next week, Sarah didn't see Derek at all. Not at the diner, not at the grocery store, nowhere. She asked Marcus about it when he and his brothers stopped by for breakfast a few days later, and he just smiled slightly. Let's just say he's been encouraged to find new places to hang out, Marcus said. We had a couple of conversations with him. Nothing violent, just clear. Also might have mentioned his behavior to his employer. Turns out they weren't too happy to learn they had a stalker on their payroll, especially in a customer-facing role. He got fired. Oh, Sarah said. Not sure how to feel about that. Part of her felt guilty, but a larger part felt relieved and vindicated. Don't feel bad, Marcus said, reading her expression easily. Actions have consequences. He chose to harass you, to make you feel unsafe. Losing a job is a small price to pay compared to what could have happened if he'd escalated. And maybe, just maybe, it'll teach him to treat women with respect in the future. As weeks passed, Sarah found herself looking forward to the mornings when Marcus and his brothers came into the diner. They usually came once or twice a week, always friendly, always respectful, and they tipped ridiculously well. She learned their names and their stories. There was Tank, the massive man with the shaved head who turned out to be surprisingly gentle and had a degree in philosophy. There was Hawk, the lean, older man who had served in Vietnam and never talked about it. There was Bones, the club's medic who had actually gone to nursing school and now ran a free clinic for uninsured folks once a month. And there was Diesel, the youngest of the group who had joined the club to escape gang life and who now volunteered at a youth center teaching motorcycle maintenance to at-risk kids. They weren't what Sarah had expected bikers to be. Yes, they were tough and intimidating when they needed to be. But they were also smart, funny, and deeply principled in their own way. They had their own code, their own rules, and while those rules might not always align with mainstream society, they were consistent and they made sense within the framework of who they were. Marcus, in particular, intrigued Sarah. He was quieter than the others, more thoughtful, and there was a depth to him that suggested layers she hadn't yet uncovered. She learned that he had grown up poor, that his father had been an alcoholic who abandoned the family, that his mother had worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table. She learned that he had joined the Marines right out of high school, had served 2 tours overseas, and had come back changed in ways that made civilian life difficult to navigate. The club had given him a new family, a new purpose, a place where he belonged. Most people hear Hell's Angels, and they think criminals, outlaws, dangerous, Marcus said one morning when Sarah asked him about it. The diner was quiet, a lull between breakfast and lunch, and they were talking at the counter while she folded napkins. And, yeah, there's truth to that. We're not Boy Scouts. But the club is also about brotherhood, about loyalty, about protecting your own. It's about having a family when your biological family failed you. It's about living by a code that means something. What's the code? Sarah asked. Marcus considered the question seriously. Loyalty to your brothers, above everything else. Never back down from a threat. Protect those who can't protect themselves, especially women and children. Keep your word no matter what. Handle your own problems, don't bring civilians or cops into club business, and ride free. Don't let anyone put chains on you, literal or metaphorical. That doesn't sound so different from how anyone should live, Sarah observed. Maybe, Marcus agreed. But most people just talk about values. We live them, and we don't apologize for who we are. Sarah found herself drawn to that certainty, that sense of identity and purpose. Her own life felt so chaotic and uncertain. Would her mother's treatment work? How would they pay the next round of medical bills? Would she ever get to pursue her own dreams? Or would she be stuck waitressing forever? But Marcus seemed anchored, grounded in a way she envied. It was about 6 weeks after the initial incident with Derek when Sarah worked up the courage to ask Marcus something that had been on her mind. He was the last customer of the evening, nursing a cup of coffee while his brothers had already left, and Margaret had gone home early, leaving Sarah to close up. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said, refilling his coffee even though it was still mostly full. "Sure," Marcus said. "Why did you really help me? I mean, I appreciate the stuff about your sister and protecting people. But there had to be women before me who needed help. What made you step in for me specifically?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and Sarah worried she had offended him. But then he spoke, his voice thoughtful. "Honestly, I don't have a good answer. Something about the look in your eyes when that guy grabbed you. It just flipped a switch. Maybe it reminded me too much of my sister. Maybe I'm getting soft in my old age." He smiled slightly. "Or maybe you just seemed like someone worth protecting. Someone who was working hard, doing right by her family, and didn't deserve the crap life was throwing at her." "I'm not special," Sarah said quietly. "Yeah, you are," Marcus countered. "You're working yourself half to death to take care of your mom. You haven't let all this stress make you bitter or mean. You still smile at customers, even when you're exhausted. That's special. That's character. And people with character deserve to be protected from predators who don't have any." Sarah felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. "Thank you for saying that. I feel like I'm barely holding it together most days." "That's what strength looks like sometimes," Marcus said. "Not being unbreakable, but holding it together even when you feel like you're breaking. That takes real courage." They talked for another hour, long past when Sarah should have closed the diner, about everything and nothing. "Might continue." Marcus told her about his travels with the club, about cross-country rides where the road stretched out forever, and the only thing that mattered was the wind and the engine beneath you. Sarah told him about her dreams of becoming a nurse, about how she wanted to help people, the way the nurses at her mother's clinic helped her mom. They talked about music and movies, about favorite foods and childhood memories. And Sarah realized with a start that she was genuinely enjoying herself. Not just grateful for protection, but actually connecting with someone. When she finally locked up the diner and walked to her car, Marcus followed on his motorcycle, keeping a respectful distance, but making sure she got home safely. It became a routine on the nights when he was there for the closing shift. He'd wait until she was done, follow her home, and only leave once he saw her safely inside her apartment building. Sarah never asked him to do it, but she appreciated it more than she could express. Her mother noticed the change in her. Linda Martinez was a small woman, made smaller by the ravages of chemotherapy, but her mind was still sharp and she knew her daughter better than anyone. "You seem lighter lately," Linda observed one evening as Sarah made them dinner in their small kitchen. "Less tense." Did something happen? Sarah hesitated, not sure how to explain. There was a guy who was bothering me at work, following me around, not taking no for an answer. It got pretty scary for a while. Linda's face went pale. Sarah, why didn't you tell me? We should have. It's handled, Mom, Sarah said quickly. Some customers at the diner helped me out. Made sure he understood he needed to leave me alone. I haven't seen him in over a month now. What kind of customers? Linda asked, her maternal instincts clearly on alert. Bikers, Sarah admitted. Hell's Angels, actually. I know how that sounds, but they've been nothing but respectful and kind. One of them in particular, Marcus, he's been really protective. Makes sure I get home safe, checks in to make sure Derek hasn't come back. Linda was quiet for a moment, processing this information. You like him? She said finally. It wasn't a question. Mom, it's okay, Linda said with a gentle smile. You're 23 years old. You're allowed to like someone. God knows you deserve some happiness after everything you've been doing for me. It's not like that, Sarah protested, even though she could feel her cheeks heating. He's just being nice, protective. He's like 15 years older than me, and he's in a motorcycle club, and I'm just a waitress trying to keep her head above water. We're from completely different worlds. Sometimes different worlds collide in unexpected ways, Linda said wisely. Your father and I came from very different backgrounds, and everyone said it wouldn't work. But we had 20 wonderful years together before he passed. Don't dismiss something just because it doesn't fit what you thought your life would look like. Sarah thought about that conversation a lot over the next few weeks. She found herself looking forward to the mornings when Marcus came in, found herself paying more attention to her appearance on those days, found herself disappointed when he didn't show up. And she started noticing small things, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentleness in his hands despite their size and the scars on his knuckles, the way he always asked about her mother's health and seemed genuinely interested in the answer. It was Tank who finally called her out on it. He came in one morning without Marcus, and when Sarah couldn't help but glance toward the door expectantly, he grinned. He'll be here, Tank said. Had to handle some club business this morning, but he'll be by before noon. I wasn't, Sarah started, but Tank just laughed. Yeah, you were. And for what it's worth, he does the same thing. Asks me if I know if you're working before we decide where to get breakfast. Man's got it bad, even if he's too stubborn to admit it. Really? Sarah couldn't keep the hope out of her voice. Really, Tank confirmed. But you should know, dating a club member isn't easy. There's a lot that comes with it. The lifestyle, the danger, the fact that the club always comes first. Some women can't handle it. Are you trying to talk me out of something that hasn't even started? Sarah asked with a raised eyebrow. Nah, Tank said. Just want you to go in with your eyes open. Marcus is a good man, one of the best I know. But he's got demons, and he's got obligations. If you're going to be part of his life, you need to understand what that means. Sarah appreciated the honesty, even if it was daunting. She was still thinking about it when Marcus finally showed up around 11:30, looking tired but pleased to see her. Hey, he said, sliding onto a stool at the counter. Sorry I'm late. Had some stuff to deal with. Everything okay? Sarah asked, pouring him coffee. Yeah, just club stuff. Nothing to worry about. He took a sip and sighed contentedly. You make the best coffee? It's just coffee, Sarah said with a laugh. Nah, it tastes better when you make it, Marcus insisted. And there was something in his eyes that made Sarah's heart skip. They fell into easy conversation, as they always did now. but there was a new awareness between them, a crackling tension that hadn't been there before. Or maybe it had always been there, and they were just now acknowledging it. It was Margaret who finally pushed things along. She cornered Sarah in the kitchen during the lunch rush and said, "That man is crazy about you. And unless I'm completely losing my ability to read people, you feel the same way. So what are you waiting for?" "Margaret, it's complicated." "Everything worth having is complicated," Margaret interrupted. "You think my marriage was simple?" "My husband was a rancher who couldn't read or write when I met him, and I was a teacher's daughter with a college degree. Everyone said it wouldn't work. We were married for 42 years before he passed, and they were the best years of my life. Don't let fear or other people's expectations keep you from something that could be wonderful." That evening, after her shift ended, Sarah found Marcus waiting in the parking lot as usual. But instead of just waving and heading to her car, she walked over to where he stood beside his motorcycle. "Can we talk?" she asked. "Always," Marcus said, though she could see a flicker of concern in his eyes. "What's up?" Sarah took a breath, gathering her courage. "I need to know if I'm reading things wrong. Is this just you being protective? Making sure I'm safe because that's what you do? Or is there more to it?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and Sarah felt her stomach sink. She had misread everything, made a fool of herself. "There's more to it," Marcus said quietly. "Has been for a while now. But I didn't want to push. Didn't want you to feel obligated or like I was expecting something in return for helping you out." "You weren't," Sarah said quickly. "I mean, I am grateful, but that's not why I'm asking. I'm asking because I like you, Marcus. A lot. And I think maybe you like me too. But I needed to hear it." A slow smile spread across Marcus's face, transforming it. "Yes, Sarah, I like you too. More than I probably should, considering how complicated my life is. But I can't seem to help it." "So, what do we do about it?" Sarah asked. "Well," Marcus said, "I could take you to dinner. Not the diner, somewhere nice. Maybe that Italian place over in Bend. What do you say?" Sarah couldn't help but laugh at the irony. Derek had suggested the same restaurant, but the difference was night and day. "I'd love that." "Yeah?" Marcus's smile widened. "Yeah," Sarah confirmed. "But I need to be upfront with you too. My life is complicated. I'm working constantly. My mom needs me. I have almost no free time and less money. I come with a lot of baggage." "We all have baggage," Marcus said. "What matters is whether you're willing to carry it together." He reached out and gently took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "I'm not expecting you to change your life or your priorities. Your mom comes first. Your responsibilities come first. I get that. But maybe we can figure out how to make space for each other in between all the other stuff." It was exactly what Sarah needed to hear. Not promises of sweeping her away from her problems, not demands that she prioritize him above everything else. Just a genuine offer to be there, to fit into her life as it was. Their first date was everything Sarah had hoped for and nothing like she expected. Marcus picked her up on a Sunday afternoon, her one day off in a week, on his motorcycle. And Sarah discovered that she loved the feeling of riding, the wind in her hair, the sense of freedom, the solid warmth of Marcus in front of her. The Italian restaurant was charming and intimate, and Marcus was surprisingly well versed in wine despite his rough exterior. They talked for hours, the conversation flowing as easily as it did at the diner, but with an added layer of intimacy that came from acknowledging their feelings. Marcus told her about his time in the Marines, about things he'd seen and done that still haunted him sometimes. He told her about finding the club after leaving the military, about how they'd given him a purpose when he felt lost. He was honest about the darker aspects of club life, the run-ins with law enforcement, the conflicts with rival clubs, the fact that violence was sometimes necessary in their world. "I need you to understand what you'd be getting into," Marcus said seriously. "The club isn't a hobby for me. It's my family, my life. There will be times when I have to drop everything for club business, times when I can't tell you where I'm going or what I'm doing. There's danger, and while I'll do everything in my power to keep you safe, dating a club member means accepting a certain level of risk." "I appreciate you being honest," Sarah said. "But Marcus, I'm already dealing with risk and uncertainty. My mom might not beat this cancer. We might lose our apartment because of medical bills. I might never get to pursue my dreams because I'm too busy just surviving. At least with you, the risk comes with something good. Someone who makes me laugh, who makes me feel safe, who sees me as more than just a waitress or a caregiver. That's worth it to me." Something in Marcus's expression softened, and he reached across the table to take her hand. "You're really something, you know that?" "So are you," Sarah replied. They took things slow, both aware that they were navigating complicated waters. Marcus met Linda, who surprised Sarah by taking to him immediately, despite, or maybe because of, his rough appearance and honest talk about his lifestyle. Linda felt he was genuine in a way most people weren't. "He reminds me of your father," Linda told Sarah after Marcus's first visit. "Not in looks or background, but in character. He's someone who would walk through fire for the people he loves. That's rare, sweetheart. Don't let it slip away because you're scared." The relationship deepened over months, through shared meals and long conversations, through motorcycle rides on Sarah's rare days off, and quiet evenings when Marcus would sit with her and Linda, watching old movies and eating takeout. The club members accepted Sarah without reservation, treating her with a respect that bordered on reverence because she was with their brother. She learned the protocols, the etiquette, the unspoken rules of their world. She also learned about the good the club did that never made the news. The charity rides for children's hospitals, the toy drives at Christmas, the way they looked after elderly members and widows of fallen brothers. The club had a reputation for being outlaws, and sometimes they lived up to it. But they also had a code of honor that governed their actions in ways that mainstream society didn't always see or understand. It was about 8 months into their relationship when Linda's condition took a turn for the worse. The modest cancer had spread despite the chemotherapy, and the doctors gave her maybe 6 months to live. Sarah was devastated, barely holding herself together, working even more hours to try to pay for experimental treatments that insurance wouldn't cover. Marcus was there through all of it, steady and supportive in ways that Sarah had never experienced before. He didn't try to fix things or offer empty platitudes. He just showed up, day after day, doing what needed to be done. He covered shifts at the diner when Sarah was too exhausted to work. He sat with Linda when Sarah had to be at work, reading to her or just keeping her company. He organized a fundraiser through the club, and they raised $30,000 in a single weekend through a charity ride and auction. "Why are you doing all this?" Sarah asked him one night, overwhelmed by his generosity and the support of the club. "You barely knew my mom before all this." "Because you love her," Marcus said simply. "And I love you, so I'm going to do everything I can to help." It was the first time he'd said those words, and Sarah felt something break open in her chest. "I love you too," she whispered. Linda passed away on a Tuesday morning in early spring, with Sarah and Marcus both at her bedside. Her last words to Sarah were, "Be happy, baby. That's all I ever wanted for you. Be happy." The grief was overwhelming, a physical weight that made it hard to breathe, hard to think, hard to do anything but exist. But Marcus was there, holding Sarah when she cried, making sure she ate even when she had no appetite, handling all the funeral arrangements when she couldn't face them. The funeral was attended by more people than Sarah expected. Friends from the diner, neighbors from their apartment building, nurses from the medical clinic, and a contingent of about 20 bikers in full club regalia who stood at the back respectfully and created an honor guard as Linda's casket was carried out. "Why are they all here?" Sarah asked Marcus, tears streaming down her face. "Because they're family," Marcus said. "And family shows up. Your mom was important to you, which made her important to us." In the weeks after the funeral, Sarah struggled to find her footing. The apartment felt empty without her mother, and the purpose that had driven her for years, taking care of Linda, paying medical bills, was suddenly gone. She felt adrift, purposeless, and the grief threatened to swallow her whole. Marcus gave her space when she needed it, but was always there when she reached out. He encouraged her to start looking into nursing programs again, even offering to help pay for tuition. He suggested she might want to move out of the apartment that held so many memories of her mother. Maybe find a place that felt more like a fresh start. "What if I'm not ready?" Sarah asked one evening as they sat on her couch, her head on his shoulder. "Then you wait until you are," Marcus said. "There's no timeline for grief, no right way to do this. You just take it one day at a time and let yourself feel what you feel." It was Tank who came to Sarah with an unexpected proposition about 6 months after Linda's death. He found her at the diner during a quiet afternoon and slid into a booth with a serious expression. "Got something I want to run by you?" he said. "The club has been talking, and we have an idea, but we wanted your input first." "Okay," Sarah said cautiously. "We want to start a foundation in your mom's name," Tank said, "to help families dealing with cancer costs, help cover treatment, medication, transportation to appointments, all the stuff that insurance doesn't handle and that drowns people financially. We'd fund it through our charity rides and events, and we thought maybe you'd want to be involved in running it." Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes. "Are you serious?" "Completely serious," Tank confirmed. "We've all watched what you went through, how hard you fought for your mom. And we know there are hundreds of other families out there in the same situation. We can't save everyone, but we can help. And it seems like a good way to honor Linda's memory while also doing some real good." "I don't know what to say," Sarah whispered. "Say yes," Tank suggested with a gentle smile. "Give yourself a purpose again. Your mom wanted you to be happy, right? This could be part of that, helping others while honoring her." Sarah agreed, and over the next year, the Linda Martinez Foundation became a reality. Sarah split her time between waitressing and managing the foundation, learning about nonprofit administration, fundraising, and grant writing. The club threw their full support behind it, organizing events and spreading the word through their extensive network. Within the first year, they had helped 15 families with cancer-related expenses, and the numbers grew steadily. Marcus proposed to Sarah on the 2nd anniversary of the day they met. Not the first date, but the actual day he had first stepped in to protect her from Derek. He took her back to the diner, which Margaret had closed early and decorated with candles and flowers, and got down on one knee in front of the booth where it had all started. "You walked into my life at a moment when I didn't even know I was looking for something," Marcus said. "You've made me want to be a better man, not because you demanded it, but because you deserve it." You've shown me that strength isn't about never breaking. It's about putting yourself back together and keeping going. I want to spend the rest of my life being the person you can lean on when things get hard, celebrating with you when things are good, and riding through life together. Sarah Martinez, will you marry me? Yes, Sarah said through happy tears. Yes, absolutely yes. The wedding was a blend of both their worlds, held at a rustic venue outside of town, with a mix of Sarah's friends and family and about 50 club members. Sarah wore a white dress that was elegant but simple, and Marcus wore black jeans, boots, and a leather vest over a white shirt. Formal for him, and Sarah wouldn't have wanted it any other way. Tank officiated, having gotten ordained online specifically for the occasion, and his ceremony was surprisingly moving, speaking about loyalty, honor, and the kind of love that weathers storms. Margaret cried through the entire ceremony, and afterward, she pulled Sarah aside. "Your mother would be so proud," she said. "You found someone who sees you, really sees you, and loves you for exactly who you are. That's rare and precious." The reception was raucous and joyful, with music and dancing and more food than anyone could eat. The club members taught Sarah's friends how to do line dances to country music. And Sarah's friends taught the bikers some surprisingly elaborate salsa moves. It was chaotic and perfect, and exactly what both Sarah and Marcus wanted. Two families coming together, different worlds colliding and creating something new. Sarah's life had transformed in ways she never could have anticipated from that scared morning when Derek had grabbed her wrist and a stranger had stepped in to help. She had found love, purpose, family, and a strength she didn't know she possessed. The diner was still part of her life. She continued waitressing a few shifts a week because she enjoyed it and wanted to stay connected to Margaret. But the foundation had become her primary focus. Under her leadership, the Linda Martinez Foundation grew significantly. Within 5 years, they had helped over 200 families, had chapters in 3 states, and had caught the attention of national media. Sarah became a spokesperson for the cause, sharing her mother's story and her own experience navigating the impossible financial burden of cancer treatment. She testified before state legislatures about the need for better insurance coverage and medical cost transparency. And through it all, Marcus was there. He had his club business. He eventually became the chapter president, a position of significant responsibility. But he always made time for Sarah. He attended her foundation events, rode in every charity ride, and used his network to connect her with resources and donors. When Sarah finally enrolled in nursing school, going part-time while managing the foundation, he quizzed her for exams and celebrated every milestone. They bought a house together, a modest place on a few acres outside of town with enough space for Marcus's motorcycles and a large garden that Sarah discovered she loved tending. They talked about having kids someday, though both agreed they wanted to wait until Sarah finished nursing school, and the foundation was stable enough to run without her constant oversight. The incident with Derek felt like a lifetime ago, though Sarah still occasionally thought about how differently things could have gone. She learned from Marcus that Derek had moved to another state about 6 months after their confrontation, and as far as anyone knew, he hadn't bothered anyone else. Whether that was because he'd learned his lesson or simply hadn't fixated on anyone new, Sarah didn't know and didn't particularly care. He was a closed chapter in her life. What mattered was what had come after. The love, the growth, the purpose she had found. Her mother's death would always be a wound, but it had also been a catalyst for transformation. The foundation helped keep Linda's memory alive in a tangible way, helping others navigate the same nightmare Sarah and her mother had endured. On what would have been Linda's 65th birthday, Sarah and Marcus rode his motorcycle out to the cemetery. Sarah placed fresh flowers on her mother's grave, sunflowers, Linda's favorites, and sat on the grass, talking to her mother the way she still did sometimes. "I think you'd approve of how things turned out," Sarah said softly. "The foundation is helping so many people, Mom. And Marcus, you were right about him. He's exactly what I needed, even when I didn't know I needed it. I'm happy, Mom. Just like you wanted. I'm really, truly happy." Marcus stood a respectful distance away, giving Sarah privacy for her conversation, but close enough to be there if she needed him. When she finally stood and walked back to him, he wrapped his arms around her in a gentle embrace. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," Sarah said. And she meant it. "I really am." They rode back home as the sun began to set. The familiar rumble of the motorcycle beneath them, the wind in their faces, and the open road ahead. Sarah tightened her arms around Marcus's waist and felt profound gratitude for the twist of fate that had brought them together. A scared whisper in a diner, a stranger who chose to act, and all the moments that had followed. Life had thrown Sarah more than her share of challenges, but it had also given her unexpected gifts. She had learned that family wasn't always blood, that strength came in many forms, and that sometimes the people who seem most different from us are exactly who we need. She had learned that heroes don't always wear uniforms or badges. Sometimes they wear leather jackets and ride motorcycles and live by codes that mainstream society doesn't understand. Most importantly, she had learned that she was stronger than she knew, that she could survive loss and find joy again, and that asking for help wasn't weakness, but wisdom. As they pulled into their driveway, Marcus cut the engine, and they sat for a moment in comfortable silence, watching the last rays of sunlight paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Thank you," Sarah said quietly. "For what?" Marcus asked, turning to look at her. "For stepping in that day. For seeing me when I felt invisible. For loving me through everything. For being exactly who you are." Marcus smiled, that slow, genuine smile that she loved. "Thank you for trusting me. For taking a chance on a guy in a leather jacket with a scary nickname. For showing me what it means to really love someone and be loved back. You made my life better in ways I can't even put into words." They dismounted and walked into their house hand in hand, ready for whatever came next. The road ahead would have its challenges, life always did. But they would face it together, and that made all the difference. Years later, when people asked Sarah about her life, about how she went from being an exhausted waitress, barely keeping her head above water, to running a successful nonprofit and building a life she loved, she always came back to that day in the diner. That moment when she had been scared and desperate enough to whisper to a stranger about her problem, and that stranger had chosen to care. "We never know when our lives are going to change," she would tell people. "When someone is going to step in and alter our trajectory completely. The important thing is to be open to those moments, to accept help when it's offered, and to pay it forward whenever we can. That biker who helped me, he taught me that protecting people isn't just about physical safety. It's about dignity, about making sure people feel seen and valued and supported. That's what I try to do now with the foundation and in my nursing career. I try to be for others what Marcus was for me, someone who steps in when it matters." And Marcus, when asked about why he had gotten involved that day, would simply say, "Because it was the right thing to do. Because I could see she needed help and I was in a position to give it. That's all there is to it. The fact that it led to the best thing that ever happened to me. Well, that was just a bonus." Their story became something of a legend within the club, told to prospects as an example of what it meant to truly live by their code. Protect the vulnerable. Act with honor. Stand up when others turn away. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, doing the right thing brings rewards you never anticipated. Sarah never forgot where she came from, the struggles that had shaped her, or the moment a Hell's Angel had looked at a scared waitress and decided she was worth protecting. It informed everything she did, every person she helped, every decision she made. And whenever she saw someone in trouble, someone being harassed or threatened or simply struggling alone, she stepped in. Because that's what you did when you understood firsthand how much difference one person choosing to act could make. The diner where it all started eventually became a regular meeting spot for the foundation, with Margaret donating space for volunteer meetings and planning sessions. The booth where Derek had grabbed Sarah's wrist and where Marcus had proposed was marked with a small plaque that read, "Where it all began." It became a reminder that our darkest moments can sometimes lead to our greatest transformations, and that angels come in all forms, even ones wearing leather and riding Harleys. Sarah's story was one of resilience, of finding strength in unexpected places, and of the power of human connection. It was about a young woman who refused to let circumstances define her, who turned tragedy into purpose, and who found love in the least expected place. But more than anything, it was a story about the ripple effects of choosing to care, of stepping in when you see someone in need, and of believing that everyone deserves to feel safe, valued, and protected. And it all started with a whisper. "He won't stop following me." And a stranger who heard that whisper and chose to do something about it. Everything else followed from that single act of courage, both hers in asking for help and his in providing it. Together, they had built something beautiful from something terrifying, and in doing so, had proved that sometimes the most unlikely connections become the most important ones in our lives. Start your own conversation.